Hello, this is my cat. This is also my cat. My name is Matt, and this is a series where I tattoo my own leg. I've done something like 15 or 16 tattoos so far, and today we're working on a new one. To be honest with you, I bite off more than I can chew with this project, but it turned out alright nonetheless. This is a portrait of a late friend of mine, and I've always really wanted a professional tattoo of it, but just decided to do it myself now. The image has always reminded me a lot of the main character from my favorite book series, The Dark Tower by Stephen King. So this is going right up against my previous Dark Tower tattoo, my 𝙗𝙧𝙧𝙬 tattoo, but this is my buddy Miles as Roland. I went back and forth between drawing by hand and making digital flash. It's a lot different than the other art I've previously done because it's so much more detailed. So it took a few attempts to get it right. It also was a lot more difficult to get printed with this carbon paper printer. I wanted to leave a lot of the darkness in the stencil so that I would know where I was blacking in. Since I'm working on this upside down, it's kind of difficult to comprehend what I'm working on when I'm in that flow state. But my paper printer is kind of a budget one, and I end up doing quite a few attempts of this to try to get it right, but it's okay. Early on, all I'm really doing is making a reference just so I can look over this and like feel it out. I end up making some changes before it actually goes down anyway. When you just print lines and not all of this solid grayed out space, the stencil actually goes down a lot cleaner as well. So you have to be really good at using your stencil liquid application, but you know, we'll get there. So these are various attempts I made at printing this out. They all got kind of chewed up by the carbon printer. Eventually, I found that if I kind of like fed it through and sort of tugged on it just a little bit, it printed a little bit nicer. I still had some issues with the print, but it wasn't getting eaten up inside the printer. I should replace this guy sooner or later, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. So for now, I'm just going to keep struggling with it. Even though this is just a test run, I still clear out all my hair to make the stencil go down as clean as possible. I never end up buzzing far enough. I don't know why. I always think the tattoos are a lot smaller than they are. And anytime I use my stencil applicator solution, I always put on gloves because you just need to get used to how it feels putting on gloves. You will always be doing that in the final result. So clean the whole area. I get any oils out of my skin, let it fully dry before I start putting something like stencil stuff down. Generally, you put some marks down on your skin to decide exactly where you're gonna go. I just kind of felt it out this time. You put a really thin layer of stencil stuff down. A lot of professionals do 2 layers, and you let it get nice and tacky before you actually press down your stencil. I kind of edited this really tight, and it looks like a lot faster of a process than it is, but it takes about 10 minutes to get your stencil stuff down. So because of the way my printer ate it up, a lot of this bottom side of his coat didn't come out very well. But what's interesting is that it actually kind of inspired me for how I'm going to end up cutting this down. In this part, I'm just trying to clean off the stencil. If you can get to it within 10 minutes, you can get off like 80% of a stencil. But I was using alcohol wipes. Try using something like the stencil stuff instead. What I decide to do to change this is grab some transparent tracing paper, and I put it up against my leg so that I can get all of these tattoos lined up right against each other. This will never look like a full sleeve. This is definitely a fridge magnet tattoo sleeve, but I'd like to fill in any empty spaces as I go anyways. So anyway, I put a line up sort of the straight part of my thigh so that I could kind of line up the figure. I just don't want him to look like he's doing the limbo or something like that. But it's really difficult to get a tattoo, especially a dynamic tattoo, and with like straight lines like are on the revolver of this piece. It's just gonna look wonky no matter what. You have to pick and choose your battles, but yeah, I use this piece of tracing paper to sort of cut down the cloak a little bit. just kind of making any final decisions on what I want the actual tattoo to look like, and decide to do one more test run just to check the size out. By the way, it's absolutely illegal to move a resting cat, so we're just going to pull over second chair. Luckily, I have a plethora of chairs in my work area, and just going to cut down one of those misprints just to try it out and see how it looks like without that flow of the cloak going behind him. I seriously considered just freehanding the bottom of this. I knew I wanted it to look kind of jagged and overlap with that other tattoo, but I decided to pull it up into a digital file anyways, just because it's better to make a decision. Again, I'm working upside down. I kind of trust myself to be chaotic, but just make your decisions. I also decided that I wanted to change out the little prop that he was holding, and I used something more what people have assumed is Roland's actual gun. This is a Dragoon Colt instead of whatever that little thing is. This is a piece of art that's inspired me a lot. I'm just going to tell you kind of quickly about my friend Miles. We met at a photography meetup. We both went to the same photography meetup, and we would collaborate together. I used to go over to his studio every couple of weeks and make all kinds of different art. He absolutely felt like something I manifested from my teenage years, like helping me make the art I wanted to make. Me and my friend Fiona used to go over and do all kinds of weird stuff with him, and it was just the best. And he was absolutely covered in tattoos. We had some sort of subconsciously similar tattoos. And he took photos of these crows at his property, and he let me tattoo one of them on him. So an early tattoo I got to do on his collarbone was one of his ravens. Miles knew he was sick at that point, and this is actually the last time I got to go visit him, about 5 months before the cancer took him. And it's going to be 3 years on March 24th. The day after my birthday is when he passed. I made this very dark joke about him surviving St. Patrick's Day and just said, like, hey, do me a favor and just don't die on my birthday. And he actually died the day after my birthday. So, yeah, sorry to be a downer. I just wanted to give some context about why I would tattoo this picture of this man on my leg. I could have drawn Roland from the Dark Tower, but instead I decided, like, I wanted this one. As I mentioned earlier, I really wanted this tattooed on my inner arm or something, but I never heard back from any of the artists I asked about it. So maybe in the future, I'll put like a hat flying off him. I'd like to add that crow that I started on Miles since I never finished it. And I might end up doing the Dark Tower itself in the background. So we'll see. I got plenty of leg space to work with. All right, back to the tattoo. So I printed out a couple different sizes of this image once I finalized it, and then I grabbed a mirror and a Sharpie, and I kind of marked out the sort of straight up line, the parallel line to the floor, because thighs go at an angle. So if I just went straight on my thigh, he'd look like he was falling back or something. So use that line as a reference as to where I'm going to put the stencil. And then my other priority is just getting everything up close to those lower tattoos without leaving a huge gap. I know a lot of people will just leave gaps in between their tattoos, and they're like, that's a future me problem. But I don't know. I'm just filling it up as I go. As you can probably see, I tend to put my reference image underneath the cling wrap on a table. This never ends up working out very well because I pile, materials on top of it and stuff. And it's not the most sanitary thing, so I wouldn't suggest it. But I end up just pulling it out and like sticking it to my leg at one point. But I also just have learned get way more prepared than you think you do. I grab way too many of these because, like, worst case scenario, you've got extra paper towels floating around. But I've definitely run out of paper towels while I was doing a tattoo, so I'd rather have too many than not enough. This is bizarrely my least favorite part of tattooing. You need to clean all hair out of the way. So A, your stencil goes down. B, when it's healing, it doesn't get stuck in the scab. Like, it just makes your life a lot easier. But I have such excruciatingly sensitive skin that, like, I hate shaving. Sometimes when I put the carbon paper down to test it out, some of it'll transfer even when my leg is dry. So you can use stencil stuff to sort of clean that off and then apply some more. Here we go. We've got the magnificent peel. Everybody loves a good carbon peel. So nice you get to see it twice. Didn't put the stencil stuff all the way down on that inner thigh. I put all those pen marks down to like show myself the outline, and yet I still kind of miss an edge. It's fine. Spoilers. We end up not even getting that far on this first pass. I'll talk about that more in a minute, but I just look in the mirror. I look in different cameras from different angles, bend my leg, see how I feel about a particular piece before I actually tattoo it. It just gives it more time to dry anyways. So that part of the gun that I missed, I grab one of these little surgical markers and fill in anything I missed, and I also do some details at the bottom of the cloak that, you know, I just want to solidify in. So it's kind of a splurge to have those pens, but it's nice for occasions like this. I'm also going to be crazy liberal with how many needles I set up because the pack is expiring. A lot of my 3-round liners ended up expiring back in December, so I was just like, whatever, just make a ton. I feel like they kind of lose their sharpness after an hour or so, so it doesn't hurt to have more. Just means less cleaning I have to do throughout. Once the ink dries inside the needles, it's kind of a pain in the butt, so just setting a whole bunch of these up. If anybody's interested, maybe I could make a video about specifically how I set up stuff like this, what materials exactly I use. I've made lists in other videos, but you know, that might be useful for some people. I'll use some petroleum jelly to get my popsicle sticks stuck down, and I'll put it on the bottom of my ink caps as well, because few things are as bad as a tattoo ink spill. That stuff is gnarly, and it does not come out of anything. I've mentioned it in the past, but I've also accidentally shaken tattoo ink and then had it like splatter on my paintings on the walls. I was like, well, this is my life now. I grabbed some sanitary clear stuff that's meant for distilling ink, but it's what I use to clean ink out of the needle as I go. And I get a bunch of tattoo balm that I'll use throughout the process. So this was basically a setup. You'll be seeing this a couple more times in this video. Setting up my station actually takes like a good hour. Like the stencil, everything that I do beforehand, usually I have to give myself like 2 hours. It's very zen to me, it's fine. I just take my time doing it, but now we'll go to the really interesting part, the actual poking. And now this video finally gets to first of all, it gets to feature me struggling putting on gloves, because you always wash your hands before you do this, and then you're too impatient to let your hands dry before you put on your gloves. Anyways, I had a hard time stretching the skin because I set up a mic right there. I really wanted you guys to be able to hear this. Internet will tell you to always practice tattooing on some practice skin or some fruit or whatever, but when it comes to hand pokes, like, hearing that little popping sound is how I know that I'm hitting the part I need to hit. And different parts of your body are going to have different skin thicknesses, but really that sound is how I know what I'm doing. Even if I have a headphone in and I'm listening to something, it's only in one ear because I want to make sure I can hear that. This whole process, I really thought I was going to get the whole outline down in one day. I usually tattoo anywhere from like 4 to 6 hours at a time. But I was not only using a 3-round liner, which is very tiny and does not hold a lot of ink, but I was being so meticulous because it's really important to me that I get this face right. Like, I know this face. I want it to look like my friend Miles. So, being very, very careful. And it took hours. I think it was about 3.5 hours until I took my first break. And my brain panicked because I'm like, oh God, this is gonna take me forever. But it was really just, you know, being careful with the face, and that's okay. I have all the time in the world to do this. That's why this ended up taking 3 sessions when I thought it was only gonna take 2. So I grabbed these tattoo wipes to try to peel off as much of that carbon as I could. I really wanted to see how much was like staying. So I was like wiping at it really hard. This is the point when I grab my reference image and I just put it underneath my shorts on my other leg because I'm tired of like looking back and forth, back and forth. It all looks like triangles and weird shapes and stuff when you're looking at it upside down, so it's a lot easier to have them right next to each other. I also replace my ink caps when I come back from a break just because ink will dry out over time. At this point, I decide I am not going to even bother getting to the rifle on this session. I'm just going to focus on getting the details of the face down. I would hate to try to line up that part of the stencil again, but it's not going to be hard to line up just that arm. The angle of the arm can change, so this is a good cutoff point for me. Something I'll do sometimes when I find that my leg is stable, like I'm not moving around too much, is put the ink cap directly on my knee. Don't do this. I've spilled before. Yeah, but it saves me microseconds and makes my life easier. I feel like your workstation needs to be as close as possible to where you're working, especially when you're hand poking. So this was probably about 5 hours, and I wish I had gotten more done at the time, but we just take a break for a while. We come back to it, so it's not too bad. Right now I'm embarrassed of myself because I'm smearing way too much of that tattoo balm on. I just had a lot left over, and I guess I didn't want to waste it, but put a thinner coat of tattoo balm over your tattoos. They will get really unhappy if they're too wet. So yeah, here we go. First session. Not a bad start, and the face looks all right. You know, could be a lot worse. I have never done photorealism in a tattoo before, so it's worked out pretty good. I end up printing the second half of the tattoo quite a bit smaller than it was the first time, just because since this is on the inner part of my leg, it's gonna bend a lot more, it's gonna warp a lot more, and I don't want it to look weirdly long. So I downsized it a little bit, and then once again took my time getting that nice and lined up with the other tattoos, focusing on where it's gonna line up against the 𝙗𝙧𝙬𝙧 and the little heart. I don't want to leave big gaps in between my tattoos if I can help it. And then we have a glorious stencil peel where my hair gets in the shot. I was so mad at myself when I was looking at this but I'm like, gotta get in the way of my own money shot. That's so funny. So second session, we just set this up, and it's about the same thing all over again. Make sure everything's sanitary, wipe everything down with alcohol, anything I might touch, clean my phone, my water bottle, wrap everything in plastic, and make fresh needle grips. Obviously, you never reuse needles. They go into a sharps container, and I just made a ton, an absolute ton, because once again, they are expiring, and we've mentioned this in the past, but tattoo needles come inside this like sterile gas, and that will leak out over time. It sounds weird because like, how does a needle go bad? But yeah, you don't want to use needles that don't have the sterilizing gas in them. So one more session where we just kind of finished up that bottom edge and got the rifle put down. I let it heal for a couple of weeks just so it's not too angry. Honestly, what was cool was like, this one never hurt. Sometimes I'll do tattoos and it's too many passes or something, but this one, no pain. It's been really cold, so I set up that little heat lamp, and the cat liked it. So please enjoy this cat break. I have the attention span of a squirrel, so I need a cat break. I need my little furry supervisor to remind me to drink water and to stop for meals and whatever. Here's a closer up shot of how we do the tattoo grips, the needle grips. And this is sort of the format for videos that I would like to do going forward. In my older videos, because I was using a lower res camera, it was just time lapses, and you just watched what I was doing real sped up. Now this video is like 50% time lapses, 50% like trying to cut it down to the actual sort of what I think is interesting bits. So we're kind of evolving here. It's just been real slow. I apologize that I have not been super active the last year. As you can probably hear, I am not the same person I was. So things are changing. I'll talk about it in the future. Final day. We're just gonna knock this guy out. This was really satisfying, because like, oh boy, I don't gotta think anymore. All I gotta do is make sure everything's clean, and then just, it's like a coloring book, just fill in inside the lines, and then you're done. I contemplated making it solid black, like you can see with the 𝙗𝙗𝙧𝙬𝙬𝙧, the little dragon there, like that's pretty solid black. But I decided to kind of play around and try to give it some texture, because what's the point in doing a hand-poked tattoo if you don't get that cool hand-poked tattoo texture out of it? And I'll get to see in the future how that's going to age. So kind of left these pokes a little bit more spread out, and it looks all peppery. I'm pretty happy with it. I originally wanted to use different like grayscales and have, instead of just having like stark highlights and stuff, like having various levels of gray. But the last time I tried to use my pre-mixed grayscale ink, my skin didn't like it very much. I did that in my Stardew Valley tattoo. And in theory, you can mix your own grays. I've done that before. But when you're not using a machine, like a machine will mix up your tattoo ink as you go. But when you're hand poking, like it's gonna settle. And that's a big mistake I made on my 𝙗𝙗𝙧𝙬𝙬 tattoo, is the ink settled and ended up way darker than I wanted it to be. So we just did one solid coat of little pokes, little dots to make them look solid. So this guy looks nothing like any of the rest of my tattoos, but that's okay. I'm still on the fence about how close it is to the 𝙗𝙗𝙧𝙬𝙬, and maybe it'll all become one bigger tattoo in the future. This one's just a lot easier to work on since it's right on top of my thigh, and I don't have to do yoga to get at it. This is how I prep them afterwards. Thin layer of tattoo balm. I used to wrap them. I used to use second skin and like all kinds of stuff. This is not great, but I don't do that anymore. It just, my skin's sensitive. I get blisters from Band-Aids now, so, you know, it's funny how I keep saying how sensitive my skin is, yet I stab it with needles all the time. Yeah, thank you very much for checking this video out. It's January of 2025. I think that's all I have to say about that. I don't want to say the same thing everybody else has been saying, but it's more important than ever to kind of unplug a little bit and to touch grass and to take care of yourself. We live in a world where you time is frowned upon, and the definition of self-care is buying things. So I'm doing the no spend 2025 to the best of my ability, and yeah, just gonna try to live life outside of the human sphere as much as I can, because the world is horrifying. Best of luck to everybody going forward. I want to say we'll be fine, but I don't know. You know, sometimes your best friend dies of cancer, so just snuggle your pet while you can. And yeah, thanks everybody. See ya soon.